Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date and help the channel grow. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And now, on with the show. You are listening to the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion with the one and only Gray. Greetings, opinion nerds. It is I, the one they call Gray, and today we're breaking the bank with a look at director Zack Snyder's 2021 zombie heist film Army of the Dead on this random act of opinion coming up right now. Let this be a lesson, opinion nerds. Roadhead only ever sounds like a good idea. In 2004, director Zack Snyder splattered and burst onto movie screens with the remake/reimagining of George Romero's classic zombie film Dawn of the Dead. Breaking into a genre already littered with classics, Dawn quickly chewed out a unique place in a world full of jump scares, squibs, and blood bags with its take on amping up the threat of the shambling undead. However, beneath the thrills and spills lay a solid story about people maintaining their humanity and finding the best in themselves even when the world is coming to a gory, cataclysmic end. Almost 20 years later, a little older, a little more world-weary and industry-scarred, Snyder returned to the genre that spawned him to find out if he can find new life in movies about the undead, leading to some interestingly mixed results. In Army of the Dead, sometime after a plague of zombies has ripped across Nevada, the members of a ragtag rescue team are down on their luck. Still carrying the emotional scars of the loss of his wife and the estrangement of his daughter, Scott Ward is approached by Bly Tanaka with a simple question. How would you like to make $50 million? It seems straightforward enough. Sneak into the now quarantined Las Vegas, take the money out of Bly's casino vault, and use the emergency chopper on the roof to get out. How hard can it be? Scott pulls a team together of old friends to do the deed, but when circumstances force him to bring Tanaka's sketchy head of security, a zombie wasteland runner, and his own daughter, the group comes to the attention of the zombie's strangely intelligent alpha, and the straightforward heist goes all kinds of crooked. Written and directed by Zack Snyder along with Shay Hatton and Joby Harold, the film stars Dave Bautista, Hiroyuki Sanada, Garrett Dillahunt, Nora Arnazeder, Ella Purnell, Anna De La Guerra, Omari Hardwick, Tig Notaro, Raul Castillo, Samantha Wynn, Matthias Schweighofer, and Richard Citrone. Now, I never get to do one of these before a film has seen its general release, so I'm just going to be more careful about spoilers. Strap in, kids. The first thing you're going to notice about Army of the Dead is its extremely unique look. Almost as if he's giving the middle finger to expectations, director Snyder, acting as director, DP, and camera operator, has chosen to make his zombie heist action hybrid his brightest and most colorful yet, a far cry from the dark, dirty images of his Dawn of the Dead. Shooting his first digital feature, Snyder employed a custom 8K red Monstro with both lights and unique vintage Canon lenses to produce a very interesting 4K 178 image. This combination of elements would typically be used to capture smaller dramas, not fantasy action films. While framed in color time to get the most visual impact, the majority handheld camera work and use of natural lighting is reminiscent of his approach in Man of Steel, which attempted to present the Superman fantasy as matter-of-fact and real as possible. Here, the film is a heightened reality built of shallow focus close-ups, soft focus long shots, hypersaturated colors, and rainbow-crusted lens flares. It is both real and unreal at the same time, blurring the line between live-action feature films and hyper-real CG animation. The effect achieved by all of this is exactly what you might expect, the feeling that you're watching something very real and completely impossible all at once. Snyder has always been a filmmaker aware of the wall between the world of the audience and the film. His 2011 film Sucker Punch almost self-awarely points this out, and he has never shied away from the idea that the camera is an active player presenting the world from a specific perspective and not a passive observer or all-seeing eye. His embracing of the camera as the brush he paints with is where you get this stylized documentary of impossible events that embraces all the artifacts of filmmaking in a world that's authentic to itself. The camera creates a sense of self-awareness, or at least an awareness of form, so the deviation from reality within the film can be forgiven. The opening scenes of the film should immediately set a level of expectation that there's a level of absurdity inherent in the world that matches intense action with a dry, slightly detached humor. Like most of his films, this presents the entire context of the film's perspective, and if you aren't on board by the end of the opening credits, you're unlikely to catch up as it progresses. The movie noticeably plays in the sandbox created by James Cameron's Aliens, and it doesn't shy away from comparison with its homages. But the story is still about people, with our main character learning, ironically too late, that it's never too late to reconnect with the people you love and to ask for forgiveness, while Zeus, the prime alpha of the zombie pack, is just shown trying to grow and protect his own family. It does adopt a tropey man is the real monster approach once the plot really begins to unfold, and there is some subtly intelligent commentary that speaks to America's time under President Donald Trump, with some very pointed commentary about the treatment of refugees and how easily government power can be abused in situations where people tend to look the other way. It also speaks to how we treat those that have served and bled for us, made all the more poignant by the fact that these people are all civilians and not soldiers. The plot is only possible because the people who sacrificed during the outbreak, even the meritoriously decorated ward, are pushed aside and forgotten when they cease being useful, making them susceptible to manipulation by the very powers that screwed them over. There's also an interesting commentary about the danger of invading a cultural space, even if you think that culture beneath you. The zombies aren't simply imprisoned in Las Vegas, they're occupying it. It is essentially their land, and they've begun to develop a whole society in there. The film's problems don't start to compound until the representative of a foreign power starts fucking with that system for its own profit. Each side is just as capable of destroying the other, but this narrative isn't simply about humanity's fight for survival against an unstoppable horde. It's now about two sides that at some point are going to have to find a way to coexist. It's as pointed in anti-military industrial, anti-fascist, pro-people helping people commentary as you're likely to find in any hybrid zombie heist film. Another middle finger aimed right at the American political right. But in the end, the movie is about family, depicting both Batista's ward and Zeus as each trying to do right by theirs. Unfortunately, the conflict of goals leads to the destruction of both. As fascinated as I was with the film's presentation, I was let down by the fact that I wanted so much more. My expectations for the film were that it was going to be the most intense, balls-to-the-wall film it could possibly be from start to finish. I desired an absolute manic thrill ride of gory horror, Dawn of the Dead turned up to 12 on your AM dial. And while the film does have more than its share of gooey exploding zombies and gushing blood spurts, it is not, in any meaningful way, a horror movie. In our world, zombies mean horror, but there is no attempt here to push the buttons of dread. To scare the audience, they have to identify and sympathize with the emotions of the characters, the film creating a sense of terror or dread because that's what the characters are feeling. This is the nature of the experience the audience shares with a film. However, these characters being tested and hardened when it comes to fighting zombies changes that equation. There is no fear or dread in them for the audience to identify with. So while the movie is certainly intense, there is little in the way of jump scares or an attempt to induce nightmares about the flesh-eating undead garbed in Liberace capes or leather chaps. From the visual style to the humor to the extremity of the gooey viscera, there should be little doubt that Army is closer to being a cartoon than it is a piece of serious horror filmmaking. The Vegas setting lends itself to some tongue-in-cheek, and indeed the film as a whole doesn't shy away from being humorous. Snyder's direction finds an area where the stakes within the world are taken seriously, but the characters are well past the terror of the initial situation, so the audience is allowed to revel in how ridiculous some of it is. As any Snyder fan will tell you, there's a big difference between a storyteller finding humor in a situation and one that creates jokes. This film is full of the former, but almost definitely avoids the latter, keeping things light enough to make the film fun without turning around every few minutes like an obsessive party host constantly asking if you're having a good time. I feel that while the characters are as fleshed out as they needed to be thanks to another great opening montage of storytelling from the director, the film may have benefited from a couple less, with more focus put on continuous drama between them. As it is, the dramatic work between characters is mostly held to specifically isolated scenes, making them feel more like expo dumps than emotional explorations. It makes sense given the nature of the plot and how the events within unfold, but that doesn't make it feel any less flat. It could be forgiven seeing as the movie isn't presented as a character drama, but they're the ones that brought it up and put it on screen. This movie is going to be part of an ongoing argument over runtimes, as some feel it should be more wham bam thank you Sam than a Lord of the Rings scaled B-movie. I honestly don't know how to feel about that. On the one hand, you could cut a solid crazy job gone wrong flick out of this if you were willing to make some sacrifices, but many of those sacrifices would have to be made during the screenplay stage because too many little beats depend on each other and do require the room to breathe to be effective. Studios have asked Snyder to do trims on his films in the past, and given how he approaches storytelling, the removal of that material in post has always been to the film's detriment. It's why his director's cuts are so praised and valued over their theatrical counterparts. The movie may feel slow at times, but it becomes easy to understand why. I can see exactly the kind of material people would choose to take out, and in my opinion, it's better to leave it in. I would much rather have the kind of contrast that makes the more entertaining elements pop than to trade that textural balance for a quicker pace. Writing about a Zack Snyder movie has become an exercise in writing about Zack Snyder as an artist, whether you intend it to be or not. Every film he makes feels like a Zack Snyder film, which is both a blessing and a curse, as you know pretty much what you're going to get and how you feel about that. I've never loved a Snyder film right out of the gate, but more than any filmmaker, his movies always seem to open up to me over time. It takes time to get to all the nuances of the work, but it always ends up being time well spent, even if it's just noticing the great attention to detail he places into every shot. It all makes a difference. Snyder's films always have immediate impact, but are also crafted for lasting value, so I've learned to give the director a lot of latitude, and thus far, that generosity of mine has never failed to be rewarded. Army of the Dead shows a lighter side of a director infamous for his dark, brooding heroes and grim photography. It treads closer to a straight popcorn flick than anything he's previously produced, and though it might be trying to say too much at one time, as is his penchant, you'll just have to adjust to the way the movie operates because it's not going to change to suit you. Army of the Dead might not be a total reinvention of the zombie movie, and it certainly isn't a movie interested in scaring you at all, but it does add some interesting new wrinkles into a genre that has found itself following the same 2 or 3 types of approaches in the last few decades. I think the movie is going to entertain a lot of folks, even if the balance of elements doesn't feel quite there the first time around. The zombie movie may not be dead, but this film will still give it a shot in the arm to get it shambling again. It's got just enough bite to really get under your skin without leaving you cold, and other zombie puns to illustrate the fact that I think it's worth your time. Even if you think I'm dead wrong, I would advise you not to turn your back on this film. You might just regret it in the end. This has been the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion. As always, I have been Gray, and if you like what you heard, you can leave a tip at our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/notthepopularopinion. You can follow us on Twitter at @only_Gray, and don't forget our main page at notthepopularopinion.wordpress.com, where you'll find more great articles just like this. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're as good to others as you are to yourself, we might just make it through this mess. See ya.